Today's guest bought, operated, and then finally exited a tech startup. That was his first journey. And now he's moved on to do something opposite, totally different. And he's in the middle, I guess probably the deep end of acquiring via a self-search, a solo process, a new business. Well, actually a business that's been around for quite some time, but he's diving in and purchasing that business and going on his second journey. So today, with today's guest, we're going to dive in and talk about the lessons learned, the downs, the highs of his first journey, and probably some of the lessons that he's getting into, new things that he's learning with purchasing a, like I said, different, perhaps blue collar business. So with no further ado, Taylor Carcasole, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Happy to be here. Thanks for taking the time with me, John.
Yeah, Taylor, thanks. And so maybe just a quick call out to Hunter Scott. I believe Hunter, my memory is still correct. It fades sometimes. So Hunter connected us probably about 2 weeks ago. I was giving him a download to how my career had changed, the trajectory anyways, what I was up to. And he said, man, you have to meet Taylor. And that turned into, I think, a 2-hour conversation with you and me in a small coffee shop, which could have gone for probably another 16 hours.
All of our conversations seem to be like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And FYI, I've just got the medium tier service for this app to record our chat. So I think we only have like 8 hours. So let's try to keep it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we'll be cut off. Great.
Brilliant. So really excited. I think we're going to have a great conversation. I always learn something new when we talk through your stories. And that's probably because there's so much depth and different journeys and things that happened within those different storylines. So looking forward to it. Maybe before we get going here, chatting about the first business you ended up diving into and acquiring, let's do a quick intro just on a little bit about yourself, background, etc. So I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, sure. Born and raised, I'm talking to you today from Calgary. I was born and raised in Calgary. Moved out to Ontario for university. Studied at Queen's. Actually, kind of funny story on that. I have 3 undergrad degrees. That's what happens when you're just making a decision and committing to it. I guess I was good at committing because I did finish them, but then kind of changed my path sort of afterwards.
So you started all 3 and finished them all?
Yeah.
So I studied.
I did 2 concurrently, kinesiology and life sciences. So I was thinking more kind of a medical type route. And I did finish those at Queen's and then went and studied business undergrad at Western in London, Ontario. And then I lived in Toronto for a number of years. I started my career in consulting. I moved back to Calgary. And so now life is in Calgary. I live here with my wife and my very large dog. I've got a Great Dane, and he'll probably make an appearance at some point if he wakes up.
And he has before.
And he has, yeah. He tends to do that.
So if the camera goes sideways and the books go flying, I'll just keep talking. We'll just keep doing this.
Great.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay. That's interesting. So maybe I'll swing back to the end and say, so based off everything that we've chatted about today and the journeys that you have been on, did the 3 undergrad degrees help with the success of the outcomes?
Okay.
I don't know.
We'll hit it
Diversification.
Sure.
We'll see. Cool.
Yeah.
Right on. So jumping into things, when I look back, early career, you started off, you did a bit of a stint with Deloitte, the consulting gig. And I see many people that get into buying businesses, not all of them, but a good portion. They've done some type of consulting, usually with the big 3 or 4 names within North America, or they've done some investment banking. So it seems like a good starting point. And it makes sense, right? You're working with different businesses, you're helping them, you're going to get real flavor for it. And pretty quick iterations too. It's not like you're just stuck in one business. Maybe you're stuck in a business for 12 months or 18 months for a contract. Yeah. So you did that. And then you moved on to high pro feeds. And then it looks like that was the era in your career where you started thinking about what's next, thinking about buying a business, operating yourself, which then turned into starting Versat. And I thought maybe we can start off there with what was like, take us back to high pro feeds. What were you thinking about? Where did you see the opportunity? And then ultimately, how did you jump into creating Versat?
Yeah, awesome. I think that's a good place to start. And I'll try to make it sort of the short version of the story, obviously. So the consulting firm I was with it was called Monitor Group. It was later acquired by Deloitte. So, a little taste for acquisition there, I guess. But so I worked for Deloitte. I technically worked for Deloitte for 2 days. So I am a Deloitte alumni. I had already given my notice when they announced the transaction. Sort of through, it was interesting that, it mattered because through Monitor, I had met, a fairly substantial private equity player in Canada. And that was how I ended up at High Pro Feeds. So sort of through that relationship that I had built. High Pro Feeds was an agriculture business based just outside of Calgary. And when I decided to move to Calgary for personal life reasons, they reached out and said, we'd actually love somebody with your skill set to join the team and kind of help run this business and grow the business through acquisition and grow the business organically as well. Which is hilarious because I was 2 years into consulting. It's like, what skill set?
Yeah. Maybe it's just when they said to do something, you just go do it. That's a great skill set, right? So yeah,
that's true. I was excited about everything. I was sort of 2 years into my career. I was in my early 20s. I'm not sure I was totally bringing a ton to the table other than a lot of excitement. And, I was pretty inquisitive.
Yeah. Get gas in the gas tank, right? And you'll see that, not to jump in and divert you here, but you'll see that too a lot in ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition. That's kind of the traditional model, right? It's PE shops go into Ivy League business schools and take 2 fresh green MBA students. And what do they have? Like, they're smart, they're eager to learn, they've got a gas tank filled up and ready to make a bunch of mistakes. So,
and the reality is, I still look back in my career and the time in consulting. So the time that this private equity firm kind of picked me up for High Pro, I was operating at my peak sort of intellectual ability. I'm working 110 hours a week. And like truly like deeply in analysis and thinking about strategy and everything else. So it is a place where you are sharpened, to the extreme. You've got a really fine edge. And so anyway, so I was then at High Pro, this agriculture business, with not a ton of direction as to, what I would be doing, sort of finding myself, searching around in the darkness a little bit, trying to figure out where to spend my time. They would give me a project that they expected to take a week and it would take an hour or two because, I was fairly capable at Excel and that was sort of how things went.
Right.
And sort of long story short, I ended up working on a bunch of roll up, acquisitions. There I was able to learn the process of finding what a good, small business looks like. These were really, small businesses in the sense that they were under-professionalized. Some of them were doing paper accounting, largely. They were operated by people who had grown up in agriculture, and they'd run these businesses for some of them for 40 years or so. And so, negotiating an LOI with somebody like that, writing an LOI, negotiating purchase agreements, due diligence, and then ultimately kind of integrating these businesses was something that I got to learn on somebody else's dime, which was helpful.
Totally, right? It's run through it, make a few mistakes. And I also imagine it's also an opportunity to learn how to work with, I don't know whether I want to say like unsophisticated sellers, but maybe so, right? It is they built their business on doing, right? Getting things done, working with the customer, doing all this, all these processes around selling your business. Probably they haven't gone down this road before, or even understanding like how do you evaluate a business. So a lot of, I would assume, learning.
100%. Yeah. So these are all very sharp people. They're all very smart people who are running businesses of, these were still substantial small businesses. They were making, $2+ million of EBITDA a year.
Sure. Okay.
That we were buying. So, they are smart people. But yeah, they're not sophisticated when it comes to how do you sell a business. And so what's consistent there to, looking at small businesses today is developing that trust so that they can trust you in walking them through the process, right? You are in a bit of an odd position when you're trying to buy somebody's business and educate them along the way. It's a really tough, it's tough for them to kind of both trust what you're saying is true and fair, and negotiate against you. And it's tough for you as well to kind of draw that line. I think you have to be extremely forthcoming and honest about how these things work, and call out where you're maybe a little bit more buyer biased, so that they kind of can understand what down the middle of market is. So yeah, I learned that. I mean, I had cowboy boots and a belt buckle on, and I was driving around in Alberta and down in Texas and New Mexico and stuff, and meeting these people who are running businesses. So it was a very, like, when I say boots on the ground approach, I literally mean boots on the ground. Yeah.
And cowboy boots at that. It sounds fun. Awesome. And that's that trust piece is so important. And it's an interesting dynamic, just to touch on it again, right? You're in a point where you're kind of jumping on conventionally both sides of that fence from a buyer seller perspective, right? You're not really keeping cards close to the chest. Maybe it's it's a Canadian way of doing things, right? It's being very open. It's teaching them what to expect. And then at the same point, you have to kind of negotiate for the best deal. But I think done well, not saying that it's easy, but done well, would you say that the outcome is better long-term relationships? And just to take it a bit farther, it probably sets up for a really fantastic transition period between the seller and the buyer.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think going in with, a lot of honesty, transparency, and trying to build that trust, pays dividends later. There's always some challenge post-transaction or during the transaction, and that trust allows you to overcome it. I think the other piece is, like, not being in a position where you have to be a bottom dollar buyer.
Yeah.
So if you have to erode all of the seller's value in that negotiation, it just makes for a very, you have to be a little less honest and transparent. And I think that hurts both of you in the long term. So being able to be in a position where you're looking to buy businesses where you can pay what they're genuinely worth, I think that is sort of like step one. And in this case, at the agriculture business, and we can talk about how I've done that since, but at the agriculture business, we didn't have to be a bottom dollar buyer because we knew that we had true hard synergies we could get out of the deals right away.
Right.
So we could pay them for what their business was worth to them. And we knew that we could make it worth, an order of magnitude more to us. And I think that was hugely valuable in those transactions.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. That totally makes sense. Okay, so continuing on, you've done kindergarten now and learned a bunch under a company. So all the mistakes they kind of took on, plus or minus. So where did the idea come for moving into and starting your business? Or were there partners involved with that? What did that look like? What was the opportunity that you saw?
Yeah, I think so. Through this process at the agriculture business, I was like, these are the things I seem to be good at, is sort of identifying businesses and negotiating with business owners. And I mean, there was part of it where I wanted to be my own boss. I liked all of the people I worked with. I really enjoyed learning from the private equity firm and the leaders of the organization. But I've just sort of always wanted to do my own thing all through life. And so I just sort of thought that was maybe a good way to get into it, right? I had one of the other benefits. So I learned a lot on these other people's dimes. I also had the ability, the private equity firm had opened up the ability for, employees to buy some shares. And I took every option. So I borrowed money from the bank. I bought I wouldn't recommend this approach to other people.
Yeah. Refinance the house. Yeah.
Well, and I knew that I was young, right? I had a lifetime to make up for it if it went wrong. So I did see it as it sort of wasn't that big of a deal. I'd be able to pay it back one day. So I borrowed a significant amount of money, significant to me at this stage in my career.
Yeah.
And bought as many shares as I could, and things went very well in the company. I won't share too many details, but let's say it was a 4 or 5 plus multiple of capital kind of situation. So,
Okay.
so paying back the debt didn't end up being all that big of a deal. And so I left the business. So we sold that in 2017. I say we because, I owned a little bit, but really the private equity firm sold it in 2017. I did a bunch of the work.
Yeah, sure.
And so I had, a little bit of seed capital. I had a little nest egg at this point, a far larger nest egg than probably most people would at that age, but ultimately still kind of a small chunk of cash.
Right.
And I just thought, I could do this again on my own. I'm sure I can sort of come up with a way to come up with the rest of the money I need. I didn't actually know how I would do that at the time. But I figured, I'll go and look for a small business to buy. I did. There was a moment where I was like, maybe I'll go buy a feed mill, which is what I had been buying while I was at the agriculture business. And then started realizing that I didn't like the idea of living in kind of the middle of nowhere, southern US or wherever I'd be.
Yeah.
Yeah. While the businesses were great and transacted for good multiples, it sort of wasn't worth the life trade-off.
Right.
And so I decided to start looking more locally at, home services businesses, plumbing businesses, HVAC, funny enough. And none of that was prompted by this world of ETA and searchers and stuff, because I didn't know any of that existed. And maybe in 2017, the community wasn't as rich. But it was just sort of, I figured that was the kind of business I'd be able to wrap my head around, right or wrong. Just sort of thought something I could get into.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And it's somewhat, I think, because I've looked at a few of them, it's somewhat repeatable. You can look at what are the types of activities these experts and these businesses do. And it's essentially, a drop-down menu. There's 20 or 100 things, right? And it's like, that's what it is. And new things are rare. So it's a great opportunity to be able to learn that, right? You don't have new things flying at every day. And
that's right.
Yeah, I was thinking about your timing there. Man, great thoughts. I think a lot of people, not a lot of people, but several people within the ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition community, were doing the same thing. But I agree. I don't think, like looking back through a bunch of different social feeds and different networks I'm in, I don't think they were talking about it back then. They were doing it. They were deep in the trenches and kind of going, I hope this works out. But now you look back after whatever, 8 years, 10 years of running those businesses, and they have great storylines. So it's one of those things is, you can't really predict the future. But yeah, it was, I think, the interesting things to look at. Now, I think this would be a side conversation. We'll dive into it. But I think some of these HVAC companies now, at least in the US, man, they're multiples that they're getting because PE roll-ups. It's
well,
can't touch
exactly.
it.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, it probably wouldn't be in my, core thesis today. Like commercial window cleaning was another business I was looking at. It's a very typical one now today.
Totally.
But yeah. So anyways, it was sort of the type of business I thought I could wrap my head around. The only resource I had really relied upon at that point was the Harvard business, how to buy a small business.
Right.
And yeah, there weren't really these online communities or podcasts or whatever else. And so in saying all of that, so I was looking for a small, and we can, maybe get onto Versat.
Yeah.
I was looking for a small sort of more home services type business. And, as life goes, that's exactly the opposite of what I did. I ended up acquiring a software development, and design agency that was based here in Calgary, but had kind of started to expand their presence in Canada.
Awesome. Okay, so I didn't realize that. I thought it was a startup. I should have read more deep into your back history. Okay, so
Yeah, so I can tell you, so where the business was at the time, let's say like 25 or so people, they had been around at that time for, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years.
Okay.
And so, they had grown. They'd started as kind of almost a web shop, like, they would create marketing sites for companies and stuff, really, high quality design, but ultimately doing, fairly low ticket items. And over that 8-year period, they had grown into, more product design. So designing more like user interfaces for applications and stuff.
Okay.
And when I met them, the banner customer that they had landed was American Express. So they had landed the global business travel of American Express. And I met, the founder through a friend. So I'd gone to high school with his wife.
This
and
business. Jeez, I thought you were talking about American Express. I was like,
no,
okay,
sorry.
Let's go down that road too. But okay, got it. Okay.
No, sorry. Versat's founder, I met through, I had sort of been friends with this person, but, really met him through his wife. And we were just sort of talking about business, and I was telling him about the kinds of things I was looking for and wanted. And he was telling me about the challenges and sort of successes his business had had. This developed over many months. And ultimately what we realized was the things that they were struggling with, I could probably help with and really kind of accelerate them past that. And ultimately, maybe together we would generate some cash flow from this business and go and buy the types of businesses that I was interested kind of along the side.
Right.
He liked that idea as well.
Got it. That makes sense. So just to go back on that for a second. So you're looking at this saying, okay, it's 180 degrees from what I thought I'd go do. And I still want to go do that because I see opportunity and I really get those types of businesses. But there could be a means to end here. And you didn't look at it from just an opportunity to make dollars, which obviously you want to have that as well. Economics, make the world go around. But also you assessed fit. So you looked at this business and said, after chatting with the owner, the issues with the business or the challenges and probably the things that he doesn't like to deal with, they seem to fit right in your wheelhouse. So you could see where you could get plugged in and put some multiplier on this business for success. And then from there, look at, hopefully be able to make it a cash cow and then use that to fund your next transactions.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And I think a lot of those, while it wasn't related much to the agriculture business I had been involved in, it was sort of related to consulting, right? I mean, they were effectively a professional services organization. I understood that world. And I thought that there was actually an opportunity to draw in a bit of strategy advice alongside the development and design that they were doing to kind of pull us up market a little bit. Okay. And so it was those combination of things, plus all the typical, like they had a part-time bookkeeper and, AR wasn't getting collected all that effectively and things like that. So there was some professionalization we felt like we could do.
Got it. Okay. So professionalization, and that's a common theme. Professionalization is maybe a lump it into the same category, but maybe digitization too. I know this is kind of a digital business, but just those back office digitizations, those things seem to get looked over. Yeah. And there's opportunities there. As of today, the business still exists. And I know we'll get here in a bit on the exit. We'll talk about that. But just for listeners, we'll see if this still resonates. Maybe the business has moved on, but I pulled this from the websites. Versat is a global design firm that specializes in designing, building, and operating digital platforms for the world's top companies. The company leads the user experience and design processes applied to apps, websites, and enterprise-grade platforms for clients, including American Express, ATB, Petco, Dodge, and KDS. Versat is headquartered in Calgary, Canada, et cetera, et cetera. So still resonates?
That covers it.
Okay.
Yeah, that covers
Cool.
it. I mean, Obviously it evolved sort of over time, but that certainly covers it. And we worked with, a number of the major Canadian banks and US banks. We certainly found that financial services was sort of a niche that was complicated and not a lot of competitors could touch it, just given the level of complexity and risk. And we had experience in it. We were able to continue to grow and develop in that field.
Got it. Awesome. Okay, so taking it back. So you had chatted with this business owner, and this took several months. Which actually, it seems to be a common theme is that acquirers meet the business owner, and they're not talking about acquiring the business right away. And after a bit of time, it's like there's a mutual understanding, and then opportunities kind of come up, and then all of a sudden you go, "Oh, I didn't think this was going to happen," and then boom, it's happening. So you come to
I think that's the best way to buy a business. It's hard to create. Maybe increase your surface area of luck a little bit, but serendipity, and then ultimately just finding what I would call like what I had with my business partner, and there were actually two business partners. What I had with them was sort of a philosophical alignment around business. And that's when you're buying into a business where you're going to be operating alongside people, I think there's a bit of luck, that comes with that.
With partners,
and we just had a little bit of like magical alignment.
Yeah. It makes sense. I think there is, partners to, if you want to go slow and, kind of at your pace and be in control, you go alone. If you want to go fast and, hope that there's a little bit of luck, you go with partners. There's pros and cons to each. I tend to think partners is a better way to go. But again, it's sometimes luck of the draw. You don't know what you really have until you get into the tough decisions and those challenging days of the business. Okay, so you have two business partners. Maybe quickly, where did they come from? Were they existing in the business? And then what did it look like to put this deal together, financing, if you're open to chat about that, to essentially launch things?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. Because there were some kind of unique things that I wouldn't do now, given what I've learned. So the two gentlemen that became my business partners when I bought in were the founding partners of the business originally, going back many years at that point.
Okay.
They had brought on a couple of other business partners over their time period, and sort of all together they bought out those business partners. I bought into the business, and we became sort of 33% equal owners in the business.
Okay.
And two of us really operated and worked in the business, and the other one at that point became more of a helpful advisor, but more of just sort of an investor and shareholder.
Got it.
When I say that, there are things that I would do differently. I couldn't wrap my head at the time around how to do a minority deal and keep in the existing business partners in a really like capital structure effective way. So what we ended up doing was we valued the business and figured out sort of what a third of the business should be. We wanted a bit of cash, on the balance sheet as well, which is a bit unique here, just sort of level of safety.
Sure.
And so we figured out what, a third of the business should look like. And I wrote a check for that amount.
Okay.
I then took some personal debt because I didn't have, the full amount, that I needed to invest. I had made, some money, but not quite enough.
So that's i.e. it's the 4 to 5 times X on the capital invested from, a little bit of luck and doing the first business wasn't quite enough. So you're reaching again, which is good, right? Is you're reaching, where do I get this money? So you come up with more debt to then get that 1/3. Okay.
And so I sort of like raised some, private debt from sort of friends and family in order to kind of put together the quantum of money that I needed in order to do this deal. And the challenge with that is like, it's not the most effective way to do it. What we should have done is structure the deal like any other, acquisition of a business. And so if anybody's listening and trying to figure out, a minority deal, you buy the entire business, you set up the capital structure of the business, as you can or need to. So, you're going to raise debt against the cash flow of the business, hopefully. You put the debt on the business, and then you figure out, what is the role that the two partners need to take, the two remaining partners need to take to end up with, in this case, 33% each. And I would write an equivalent check. And so what that would have done was, I would have written a much smaller check personally, and the debt would have sat on the business. Now, everything went really well, right? And so, if we fast forward to the end of that story, the multiple of capital on my capital. So if you ignore the fact that I borrowed a bunch of money, which I don't know what bucket you end up putting that in, right? Because I'm going to have to pay it back eventually.
Yeah, so it's your family coming after you, so it's kind of your money.
Yeah,
right? You have the consequences. Yeah.
But the return for me personally, looked more like a 5 times multiple of capital and a 60+% IRR. And so it all worked out well. I just wouldn't recommend doing it that way.
Okay.
You just put the debt secured against the business. Even if you take a personal guarantee or something, you put it against the business.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I was going to ask is what could have gone wrong? But is that essentially it is instead of you holding the bag of anything bad that happens, people are coming over after you financially, or personally, sorry, versus setting it up, the typical way you do it, go by the business like you talked about, and then set things out, level set it all. Now everything is secured against company assets.
That's right. There's two pieces to doing it the way I did it. One is the risk factor. So if the business goes away, the debt remained with me. I had borrowed the money. I had to find a way to pay back, in this case, millions of dollars. And small millions, but millions.
Still millions, yeah.
Yeah. And then the other factor, which is actually the bigger one, is I effectively, at the end of the day, I pay back the full amount of that debt. Whereas if it sits on the business, you're ultimately using, only a third of what would be your distributions to pay back the debt on the business. Each of you are kind of paying down. So it would have pulled forward some return for those guys because they would have taken some money off the table initially, more money off the table initially. But it would have really redistributed and shared in that risk more evenly. So yeah, I think there's sort of no good justification for the way that I did it, unless I guess you're buying into a business where the founders are just super reluctant to putting any debt on the business. In which case, don't do the deal.
Yeah, right. Like, maybe that's another message.
If you don't believe you can make debt payments and you're that concerned about it, you shouldn't be buying a business to begin with. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah, thanks for that clarity and detail. That makes sense. And I had a flash there. It's kind of like I've seen this a few times with kind of related. You have parents putting together their will. They own a bunch of real estate assets. They have 4 kids, and it's like, okay, does Joe, Sally, Frank, whoever get the assets? And I think there's a similar lesson, which I've seen, I think, work out well, which is put all the properties up for sale, or at least, paper them as if you were going to, and then you take it to the kids and say, okay, you all are, different areas of life, different abilities to finance these things. How do we level set this, right? And that's where you start from. But like, think about it from if you're just going to go and sell that business or buy that business yourself or liquidate these assets to the general market. And then once you say, okay, that's the plan, now how do you level set things moving forward? I think that's kind of the takeaway.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So you did the deal, ended up working out. So you got the deal together, you papered it, you have your 2 partners, you get in there, you're starting to work on improving the efficiency of the business, some of those things that you saw as, we'll say, low-hanging fruit. What were the other things that what was your role in the business? And then what were you mostly focused on? Was it sales, operations, jack of all trades?
Yeah. So, again, we did go into this thinking that what we would do is professionalize the business a little bit, cash flow the business, and then go and acquire other businesses. So step 1 was get involved directly in the business. And, this ends up being a bit of a word of warning. When step 1 is get involved in the business, sometimes you never get to step 2, which is get out of the business. And that was exactly
work on the business, right? You're working in the business. Yeah, step 2 is working on it.
I was working in the business, and we tried to carve out a bit of time to work on the business. But I played a role, right? Like I was doing a job in the business, and that job changed over time. My business partner and I had very malleable roles, but we sort of did what needed to get done. So initially, step 1 for improving the business was, getting finances in order and improving reporting pretty dramatically. So again, they had a part-time bookkeeper. We moved that to sort of a full-time internal accountant and started producing, reports and being able to forecast, because we're working on these longer-term projects, understand project profitability. What types of projects do we really make good money on versus the types that, think you're high margin, but actually kind of hurt you. So really small stuff kind of hurts your capacity utilization so much that it's not worth your time. So we started to focus on that stuff. And then, you mentioned sales. Like when you're operating a small business, I have to believe you're always the salesperson. You're always the lead salesperson. it's the most important thing that you do in most of these businesses, right? Unless it's a truly, recurring business and you're just trying to add 1% a year or whatever. But that wasn't the case for this business. It was, really project based. So,
Right.
there was always some timeline to seeing zero revenue in our forecasts.
Right. And for you guys, was that like, I've chatted with many businesses over the last 6-8 months, when it's project based, sometimes companies see 6 weeks out, and that's kind of like a drop off, right? That's as far as they can see with project work. Sometimes it's 3 months or longer. What was your kind of, sales cycle?
I always joked, I don't know if this is actually the right number, but I always joked that we were perpetually 3 months away from death. And because, these projects, we moved up market to the point where we started getting some year-long projects and pretty substantial sized projects. But then the cliff is even bigger, right? Then now all of a sudden you've got 15, 20 people working on one project. And when that cliff comes, it is, it's really dangerous. So having mega projects isn't a great solution either. So, but yeah, I'd say, we roughly were always 3 months out from looking at it saying, okay, we can cover our costs. And so, you're always scrambling to make the sale. So I did spend a fair amount of time on sales. I hadn't ever done sales, but I did figure out fairly quickly that I actually had a fairly good network for the kinds of things that we were trying to sell.
Right. Okay.
I had met people who had gone on to do, great things at big companies that could afford the kind of projects that we were trying to sell. And I was able to sort of leverage those networks. And so, and my business partner is, one of the best salespeople I've ever met. I mean, he just can really sell a vision to somebody.
Storytelling.
And he's an incredible storyteller. And so, the combination of me being able to I would be able to tell a bit of the business outcome that a client might see in a pretty practical way, and he'd be able to really sell that vision and the strategy and how it shifts their organization. And so together we were able to grow sales a fair bit and really push our margin. So pricing was our biggest lever for sure. I think in every business it's one of those really obvious things, but $1 of price improvement is $1 of EBITDA increase, right? It's the only lever or not the only lever, but it's one of the few levers where it goes right to the bottom line. And so people tend to leave, they'll negotiate and leave that last dollar on the table when they're talking about pricing with a customer because they just want the work. And we would fight for every dollar, every point of margin, because it was the most important thing that, the most important economic thing.
The impact. Do. Yeah. And that's because I think it depends on where you are in your cost structure, right? You gotta look at your fixed and variable costs, but I think, correct me where I'm wrong here, you've got your fixed costs, they're there, you have variable, but you essentially, if you have capacity and everyone's not from a services business, like your product and your people are not at 100%, but you're coming from consulting, so 110% at capacity as normal operating. If they're below that, then any dollar that you add is essentially that because you already have them.
I hear. So yes and no. So yes, that's there is a variable versus fixed cost component to this. We viewed basically all of our costs as fixed because we were selling people's time, and the reality, these people weren't paid hourly; they were salaried.
Right.
And so they really are fixed costs. And so we had kind of no variable costs. And so any additional dollar in sales was going directly to the bottom line, but we had to cover, a substantial amount of fixed costs. It's a really uncomfortable business model. But when it comes to pricing, John, I was actually referring to the $1 increase in price in any business, regardless of variable and fixed costs, goes right to the bottom line. If you're making a widget that has, 99% variable cost, but you increase that price by $1, still goes right to the bottom line. And so it is, pricing is the highest economic leverage in a business, right?
100%. And that flew over my head. Thanks for bringing it back. Yeah, totally get it this time. Yes, 100%. I guess it's been 9 years since I did my MBA. These things are starting to fall off. Great. Okay. Things are going well. There's a few things in there that you captured. One of them just swinging back to was I think I can rebrand it as firing some customers too, because you did that financial analysis. You're looking at what are the sizes of margins, or what are the margins coming from different services and different customers. And I'm assuming you're looking at, okay, what are the bottom X percent, 10%, 25%, and essentially firing those customers and now refocusing the business on those type of activities. Is that correct?
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, so when you look at our business, so bought the business in October 2018, closed the deal when we sold the business in July 2021. I know we'll get there.
Yeah.
But so really we're talking about, 3 years where I was in the business. Over that period, we more than tripled EBITDA. If I think about it, 3.5x EBITDA, but we only grew our number of employees, which is really our capacity, right? The number of employees is how much work we could do. We only grew our number of employees over that period by maybe 20%. And that was driven largely by being really picky about the types of work we did and pricing it up. And so, we never fired a client. We just raised prices to the point where they would go away.
Yeah. Selection just through, changing your pricing. That makes sense. And that's an important lesson here is there are a lot of business owners that I've chatted with over my full career. There's always been some entrepreneur activities that I'm doing. It is, and I get it too, because I've been there. It is tough to say no to a customer. It is tough to get your mind around increasing prices, but you're hurting your customer. You're hurting yourself if you're not looking at these things, right? And if you do, there's good outcomes that can come from it, right? Those customers move on to find a solution that's a better fit for them. And then you get to apply more of your time for the customers that make sense to be partnered with you. So I think it's generally a win-win with some friction.
Well, and that's a really kind way of putting it. When you're in certain types of industries, Versat wasn't one of them, because we actually competed at a global scale despite being some little company based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Because you could work with an agency like ours anywhere, and most of our clients weren't based here. But when you have a bit more of a regional competitive dynamic, it's even more important to be highly selective about your customers, because there's a fixed set of customers and a fixed set of competitors. So when you land a good customer and get rid of a bad customer, that bad customer is now ruining your competitor's stay. And I think that is highly valuable. Competitors tend to be less sophisticated about that customer choice, and they get really excited about that new customer. And they don't realize that they're going to grind them on margin, be slow to pay, take up an inordinate amount of the principal's time. And so I learned that definitely at the agriculture business. We had that regional dynamic. Right. My boss would always joke, that customer, their truck is going to look great in front of our competitor's feed mill. We try to be really selective about that kind of thing. So.
Okay, maybe I was too nice, but I like that. Everything is a competition. I like to compete. I like the way that you put that. I put, although minor edits are going to happen to this, I put down the time at 43.55 to go for a little soundbite. That was a good one. So thanks. Okay, I'm not going to be so nice. Let's dive into the bad side. What were the challenges of running this business for 3 years? And I know then you stayed on for a transition period, which is a little bit longer than typical. Maybe you got too close to 5 years or 4.5 years. What were those cringe moments, those moments where I think they call them the fetal position moments? Think about your office. You're sitting in the corner just like, man, can anything else go wrong? Are you open to sharing a bit?
Oh, yeah. And because you mentioned like, okay, so things went well. Corrected you, but I guess this is the moment, because it's not like I look back and say, so the outcome was good. Things, we made a bunch of right decisions, but man, it's running a small business is just hard. It's mostly hard, and every once in a while a celebration. It's a knife fight on a roller coaster. It is just like, it's tough. So there were like, I couldn't, just picking a fetal position moment would be hard, but so I bought the business sort of late 2018. We started cooking pretty well in 2019. We felt like, things were rolling. COVID hits us in, April 2020, I guess, or March 2020. And I'm like, okay, well, we're probably not going to have a business in a couple of weeks, so that was obviously a moment. And we did have a lot of customers pull back. Not that it made a ton of sense given the, what we were building and the context of what happened in the economy. Everything was moving online. They should have been doubling down, but everybody was scared.
Yeah.
And we certainly were too. And so that was definitely a moment. We made a lot of different plans as to what we would do for how this would play out. So that was just a tough timeline to own a small business in.
So in that, like, give us an idea, or give me an idea of, so it makes sense. They should have been doubling down, tripling down. And when things like this happen, human nature, it's pause, slow down, and reassess. And usually it's too long. But during that pause, what did that translate into for your business? Was this, that 3 months, now it's like things are stopping now and there was a 5-month gap of no revenue coming in, or what was that?
So we had a couple of, I mentioned the, I don't want to say anything that's too confidential, but I mentioned the Amex Global Business Travel client. They were a very substantial client at that time. And this is the part of Amex. It's actually a separate company that books business travel.
Okay.
It is separate from the credit card company. And their revenue, you could probably guess what it did that first week of April, right? Like we're talking 95% drop in, right? Like
I guess not even this,
just gone. And so they took a couple of weeks to call us to let us know that we were, paused. We're stopping the project indefinitely, which was a substantial part of our team at the time. And it was almost like we were like, "What took you so long to call?" Like, it was so obvious that that's where it was going. So we had to make some tough choices there. In the first time in company history, we did a layoff. And these people had become, personal friends of ours.
Sure.
Had worked with the founder for many years. So it was a really dark, tough time. Everybody's spouses and kids and stuff, and so I can't even, just reflecting on how hard that was to go through is crazy. So
and
knowing a small team.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of SMB, small, medium businesses. They are small teams, right? And you're spending the majority of your waking hours in this business with them, right? So kind of a family. Hopefully not totally operating like a family, but kind of like a family. And also during that period of time, this comes up a lot in conversations, is it's not like there's a great opportunity for those individuals that unfortunately are being cut to go and find another position, because it's happening everywhere. So extremely tough situation.
Totally. And it is one of those things where you have to just sort of grit your teeth and know that, like, if you're not there to employ anybody, you're not better off. We were operating in a world where it was a really good margin business when we were at full capacity.
Yeah.
Maybe 50% margins or something like that, let's say, on a gross level. So that also cuts the other way, right? Like that means you're also carrying, that was basically all fixed costs. So when revenue drops, you still carry those costs. So we really had no choice but to lay people off, or we just didn't know how long we would survive it. And so that was certainly a fetal position moment. We had the other big lesson that came from that time, not COVID necessarily, but just, this is a professional services organization. It's one of those businesses where, they say all of your assets go down the elevator at the end of the day. And that was certainly the case in this business. We were so terrified of losing key people at so many moments. The number of times that me and Doug, my business partner, talked about, if so-and-so leaves, we're in a really bad spot. Like how could we survive without them? And then inevitably we would have that conversation and so would leave. And
we have to stop having these conversations.
Yeah. As soon as you identify somebody as like a total key person risk,
they're gone.
They're gone. Those were really devastating moments. And again, these are they tended to be personal friends, people who were fairly senior in the organization. key contributors to culture, and really smart, people in their craft. But what you learn from that, from it happening over and over again, because it does happen over and over again, is everybody's replaceable. And I don't mean for that to sound callous.
Yeah.
I mean it to sound, like to give people
realistic.
optimism.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reality is, so at first, what felt very devastating, we did start to, kind of think about as, okay, we've got cap room now. That person was expensive. What do we want to do with this cap space on our team? And that reframing really changed things for us. In kind of as time went on, every time we lost somebody who we felt was critical, we were able to upgrade. We either brought in somebody more senior, capable, or we decided to kind of shift things around and have a different set of people, and we got better each time. And we realized okay, that's an upgrade opportunity every time it happens. And so we really sought that out as opportunities to upgrade or top grade the business.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask you, what was the learning? Obviously, you just gave me that download. And one thing I've heard other business owners talk about, and I've done a little bit of this before as well, is the key people risk, key man, key woman, key people risk. Redundancy. Like, how do you train inside your organization to make sure you reduce that risk? So there's sometimes opportunity for that. Sometimes it doesn't quite work out. It's just always inevitably there. And I love your comment, reframe it. Something that I come to a lot is when unforeseen, generally negative activities occur, usually there's way more good that comes from those moments. You have to look for them.
It sounds so cliche, but it is true, right?
It is, right?
You can look at it differently. Yeah. And I think, it's not realistic in small businesses to have redundancy in all positions, right? It's never going to happen. And sometimes there are positions where nobody can really step into it. You can hire, right? You get really creative, you get after people. I think it's really important to stay very connected in your industry so that you're always meeting people.
Always be hiring,
We would always have that, somebody would leave and be like, hey, remember, so-and-so, we met them last year. I wonder what they're up to. Let's get after them. And so I think it's really important where you do have key risk. It's be meeting those people. If you got a plant manager who you think is absolutely critical, you better be out there meeting plant managers all the time. It doesn't mean you have to be actively soliciting them, but just be meeting them, increase that surface area. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, it's something I've been doing for years. I'm doing it way more these days, but I've referenced it a few times. I have this ledger, an Excel sheet. It has a bunch of different things on it, different people I meet, what they're looking for, how to match different people up to give value to each other. But one area of my ledger is around people that I see as potential future CEOs, run businesses I'm involved with, key individuals on technical side. And it's making sure you just stay involved and interested. And will you ever do business with them? The odds are is no, but they're good people. And there's usually some way that there's win-wins, even if it's not
John,
directly working.
I really like that. And I totally agree. I think, Doug and I always, when we had an opportunity to help somebody out, particularly in their career, we would always do what it took. So, if we knew somebody from some client that was looking for a job, we would work really actively to be the people who found them that next job or made an important intro. If we had somebody who wanted to leave our team or who we were exiting, we worked really hard to place them. So those folks in COVID, I think we laid off maybe 7 people, and we helped place 4 of those people.
Oh, good. Awesome.
Ourselves. And so, working really hard in those moments, to your point, it's you won't always do business with those people, but over a 10-year timeline, there are enough wins that create inordinate value where it's worth your, that little bit of time, early on. It's hard to calculate, but it's worth it.
Yeah, it's a soft side of the business, but it's partially why we do this. I think a lot of people I talk to anyways, it's about the people and the journey, right? Okay, great. Let's keep moving on. So that was good. Some dark moments, some challenges. I think there's a few lessons in there. Thanks for sharing. So let's jump into the exit. And I do want to save some time to get over to the current state. I think there's some interesting things, and doing a 180 again. I guess maybe not a 180, back to what you were originally looking for as your hypothesis or theses of investment. But before we get there on current state of what you're working on today, the exit. So how did that come about? And what did that transition look like?
Yeah. So, again, we talked about how this was a business we were trying to cash flow. We were going to generate some cash and go and buy businesses ourselves. What kept happening was the most valuable time or the most valuable focus we could invest in something was still in Versat, because we were growing. And again, it's a knife out on a roller coaster. It's hard to get off of. So, you keep putting your focus in that. But one of the beautiful things about this business in particular, and we can come back to this idea, but like not all EBITDA is created equally, right? It's laughable that we value businesses on EBITDA. And I still do it, and everybody does it, but like, a
Charlie
business
Munger
with
is saying yes, Taylor, from his grave,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe it's a fairly obvious thing, but we still all talk about these multiples on EBITDA, and a business that has is using half of that EBITDA in capex. You really have to take that into account when you're valuing the business, which should really be done on an unlevered free cash flow kind of basis.
Yeah.
One of the unique things, so two unique things about this business was capex was nil, like literally zero, because the biggest things we ever bought were laptops and monitors, and we weren't capitalizing that stuff. And so free cash flow conversion pretty good because of that. And then the other unique thing was because we were in the tech space and we were building, net new innovative stuff in Canada, there were a lot of grant programs and tax programs that meant that we were paying, some years like effectively zero tax.
Right.
And so again, like, a business that pays 22% tax versus a business that pays zero, it's a really meaningful difference in sort of that free cash flow conversion. So you should be thinking about that when you look at your EBITDA multiple. It's like, that's why these are different really by industry, but you do have to also take into account the specifics of that business.
Yes, and in a technology business, I just came from one. The largest cost is around that development, right? You're doing all of this pre-work with no revenue connected at a future state where it will provide value. Some caveats in there if you have innovative customers along the ride and they're paying something, but generally that's the largest cost. And you're right, things like, not the ones that I'm familiar with, shred credits within Canada,
yes,
that's one for
right.
sure. And there's definitely some government, provincial grants too, depending on the application. So it's a good reminder.
Yeah, being smart and getting creative about grants. And there are consultants and stuff that you can pay and they take kind of a cut. It is worth it. And it's something to be sharp about. I think in most industries, there's some type of grants that you can, take advantage of. So it's worth looking into. Okay. So going back to your question on the exit. It was, a bit of serendipity, and I've had a lot of helpful serendipity or luck in my career. I won't give the full backstory, but basically, this Belgian company reached out to us. They had been very acquisitive in Europe. They were in the IT space, sort of IT services in Europe. They had, 2,000 employees at the time, primarily in Europe. They just acquired this business in Southeast Asia, and they sort of had a strategic mandate to grow into North America.
Market
get into value-added services.
Sure.
They had, they were doing development, contracting, really. So they would sell you a team of developers. Okay, whereas we were taking on a lot more of that strategy and design and what it was going to be and how it was going to work. So a lot more advisory role. And so they wanted both of those pieces. And they reached out, they had found us. They had, done some searching and they liked our approach and stuff. And, this is happening kind of towards the tail end of COVID, but we can't travel. And so we meet the owner and CEO over Zoom a number of times. And we ended up, doing the transaction and closing the deal July 28th, 2021.
Brilliant. And so I think I heard, did you meet the owners? No, you wouldn't have. Before the deal closed?
We met the owners
Zoom?
The first time we met so we closed the deal. So we met them the first time December 2020. So December 2020
Yeah.
over Zoom.
Yes.
And then, by the time we get to know each other and due diligence is done and everything else, and purchase agreement signed July 28th, 2021. So now 7 or 8 months have gone by. We've still never met in person because travel is still challenging at this point. We then finally meet in France in September. So still months after the transaction closed. Yeah. So, a different layer of trust needed for sure. I can't imagine buying a business only having met people over Zoom. Even selling it felt weird over Zoom.
Like, are these people real? Is it, and maybe AI has come a lot since 2021, but, are these actually real people that are on the Zoom video?
Live in Canada? Is this a real business? Yeah,
exactly. How am I going to get caught here? What's not going to work out? Yeah, and I'm sure.
And so ultimately, on that transaction, on the exit, we hadn't thought we would. Frankly, we didn't think we'd be able to sell the business because we were fairly integral to the business.
Right.
But we also knew the business was challenging, right? Like it was that 3 months away from death kind of challenge, and the business was challenging. It was high margin, but there were flip sides. So when we had this conversation with the buyer, and we had a number of sort of high level conversations leading up to that point, we had all of the typical consulting firms reach out to us.
Sure.
And the type of deal that they want to do in professional services is like, we'll give you, the lint and a button from our pocket, and you can work here for the next 25 years. And, that was never really attractive to us. If you were in a situation where you needed to be rescued, fine. But that wasn't our situation.
Yeah.
And so when we had this conversation with the Belgians, we took a very, I'd say almost anti-European approach. On the very first call, went through, this is what the deal would have to look like. These are the terms up front. This is the amount of cash we need to see up front. And then we can have a conversation about earnout and retention payment after that. And we really specifically, we negotiated those things in those buckets. So we said, cash up front, guaranteed cash has to look like this, which represents this sort of multiple. And then if you want us to stick around and help you transition, let's have a conversation about the earnout and retention payment that would make that work for us.
Right. Okay.
Because we just, if we were going to sell this thing we had created, it was really important to us that we had some amount of guaranteed cash. And a lot of the transactions in that industry are done largely through earnout. And that wasn't attractive to us.
Yeah, for sure.
And so they hummed and hawed, and I don't know, it probably took a couple of weeks or whatever. And they came back and said, we can make that work.
Yeah.
We did the deal. And sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, there's so much here. I just want to be quiet and let you keep talking. Can you give me an idea? So that cash payment, I don't need to know specifics, but on a percentage of total deal, are we talking 50% of maybe I'm not understanding totally, but that first part, that first bucket, are you talking about the business we want, it's worth, I'm just going to make up numbers, $5 million, and we want 2.5 upfront, and then it's going to be 2.5 potentially for earn on that? Or are you talking about we want 5 and then it's an add-on if you want to
60? So if you took the total dollar amount that was up for grabs, it was 66%. It was 2/3 upfront in cash. And then the remainder was made up by retention and earnout.
Okay.
The earnout, so retention was, the deal there was, kind of guaranteed payment if we stuck around and transitioned. And, basically our agreement was, we had to be breathing by the end of our transition period. But we were, we would commit to helping out, and that's exactly what we did.
Right. Okay.
The earnout targets were if we, really substantially grew the business. Earnouts are tough. When you're negotiating an earnout, you're talking out of two sides of your mouth, right? You want to negotiate down those targets because you want them to be achievable so that you can earn the earnout. But then you also are trying to sell your business, and you're trying to sell this idea of growth.
Yeah.
And so you have to take an approach. And so, we certainly, discussed what the opportunities for the business could be under the, growing business. The earnout targets, the way that they shook out was they were extremely aggressive.
Okay.
And we knew that it was a low probability for us hitting them. and that was okay with us.
Yeah, but you're okay because of the rest of the deal, like the full deal.
Cash up
you're
front
like,
was good. We would have done the deal for the cash up front.
Right.
Retention payment was, enough money that so long as it wasn't really painful, we would stick around.
Yes.
And the earn out, if everything went well, would have been a nice kicker.
Right. Yeah.
That's basically the way it broke down.
I don't know. That sounds great. Like, it kind of seems like a win-win. If having that wild card left out there, I think makes sense, because if crazy success happens, then you get a little piece of that moving forward.
That's right.
So, okay. Exactly. Good for the buyers as well.
Yeah. And I think the multiple, I mean, that business, I'm just trying to do math here. I think it was the upfront cash or the guaranteed cash was about 5.2 times is what we were paid.
Okay.
That is a fairly unusual multiple in that business because it is project based. That multiple's pretty, it's strong. It's a fairly rich multiple.
But you had a strategic. I'd classify them as a strategic, right? There's a specific reason they want you.
Yep.
So
that's right. Yeah. No financial buyer would have done that deal.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Awesome. Anything else to add to the exit?
Well, so, the risk of so maybe two things.
Sure.
So one is when you are in the business and you are critical to the business, expect to be handcuffed, right? When you do a transaction, you are going with it or you are not going to sell it as effectively. And so, we had to be really clear that we would stick around with the business for an extended period of time. So our initial deal was actually that we would stay for 3 years. So I'd only owned the business for 3 years at this point, and I'm negotiating a deal that says I'm going to stick around for an additional 3 years. So it really was, you had to do the math and say, am I comfortable with that level of return?
Yeah.
Given that I'm going to also give 3 years of my life to these guys. And we were, we felt like what would allow us to go and do next made sense for us.
Sure. So you're assessing the the opportunity cost. What is the opportunity cost of, I don't know, just leaving or negotiating a different deal where maybe it's a year and a half? So what does that extra year and a half potentially get me? But you looked at it and said, yes,
we knew that the universe of buyers was small. The universe of buyers that could pay this kind of price was small.
Right.
So that was sort of one lesson is, if you think you're going to march towards an exit and you don't want to stick around forever, you got to make sure that you really genuinely have pulled yourself out of the business well before that transaction comes along.
Yes.
Or any sophisticated buyer is going to say, no, we need you as well.
100%.
So that was one lesson. Okay. The other lesson is there's something unique about that kind of business in particular. We were this small Calgary-based company. At this point, we have an office in Toronto as well. Most of our team actually was out of Toronto, Canada. But we had a global presence, right? Because it was a digital business, we were working with clients. We had clients in Europe and Middle East. We had, many clients in the US and Canada. And so our buyer universe, I think, was anyone, anywhere in the world. We had proven that you could operate remotely. We had multiple offices.
Right.
We didn't work in person with any of our clients.
Sure.
And so there's something a little bit unique about that, right? Like when people tend to be looking for a business, they have some kind of geographic constraint.
Yes.
Whether you've got a really open aperture and you say all of Western Canada, or you've got a really closed aperture and you say just Calgary. But to say I could buy any business, or I could buy this business from anywhere in the world, it does help. And so just knowing sort of we did recognize that. And so we made sure that our global presence was really coherent and nice. I think you went to the Versat website there, and
yes,
it was a really well-positioned business, which meant that somebody was going to come along at some point and say, that one looks good. I don't know where it is, but and so we had a really strong we had a way stronger reputation than we should have for having been, kind of this rinky-dink business based in Calgary, Alberta.
Yeah, who would have known it was in Calgary? Maybe it was in fine print somewhere, or you go to LinkedIn profiles to see where people actually reside. But
we weren't listing local clients; we were listing global ones, and so it's a bit of you can't do that with a commercial roofing business.
Yeah,
When it comes to a business that's software based or more digital or professional services, you can do that.
Yeah, totally. All right, good ones. Yeah, side note, I was looking at with my day job, looking at a business the other day, and I was going, man, this looks like an interesting business. I've never looked at this segment of the industry before. And then there's a few warning signs through it, and I scrolled down more. There was like a Q&A questionnaire. I must have been between a broker and the owner. And there was one question around how involved are you in the business? And after reading his answer, I was like, I'm good, can't go there, just because essentially it was like, no one else can do quoting besides me. I'm the technical person that knows how to problem solve everything. I'm the only person that can talk with the suppliers over in China. It's like, okay, that's like extreme risk. I don't care how good of a deal.
Isn't it
I gotta
so
go
helpful
I gotta go.
when they just say it? Like,
it totally,
because
right?
most sellers try to downplay the amount that they're involved. But then you do find, I mean, there are egos sometimes, and egos are really helpful in doing a deal, because somebody who has a big ego and is directly involved in the day-to-day of the business, they're going to say that. It's going to come out. They're going to say
Yeah. And there's going to be a buyer
really
too that goes,
person.
Yeah,
I can get into it. Yeah. You gotta have a high opinion of yourself to say, I'm going to dive in and do all of these tasks as well as the owner who's been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I'm sure it will get picked up. It was good besides that. Okay, few minutes left here. Let's jump over to current state. Super interesting. You put like a teaser in there. I love that. It's not like a roofing business where you're not global, but who knows? Like, we could talk in we talk every once in a while already, but like talk in 2 years and you'll be saying, hey, so like now with the roofing business, I'm doing roofs over in Japan. They're totally different, but who knows?
Maybe we'll learn something new.
The next one. Okay, so you had the exit, you got out of your transition period, which we just talked about with the existing company. They're still doing great. Already did kind of a pitch for that business, talking about what they do. So they're off and running. You're out of that business fully now. And then actually when we first connected, we sat down for a coffee. I told you I've been looking for a business to buy and been at it for, I think at that point, 2-3 months. And he said, oh yeah, I'm doing the same thing. And by the way, I think I'm going to sign an LOI next week. I was like, dang, man, love it. You've been doing it for like 2 weeks. So you're still working on that. It does take time. I think the average is about 90 days to get through it. I know you will want to talk about all the specifics, but I think there's a few lessons in there. You want to give us just a quick overview of obviously it's a roofing business, kind of large scale, how big they are they specialized, where do they operate? Maybe not just down to the city, but kind of, Western Canada, Eastern Canada, US, whatever. Kind of give an overview.
And I'll try to be, obviously careful just given where I am in the deal.
Yes.
So I ended up wrapping up my transition period a bit early at the last company, which is why I was sort of wrapped up December 31st. We, mutually felt like the transition was complete and we were all kind of excited to go separate ways. I officially kicked off my process, which I now know is called a search. I kicked off my process January 6th, looking for businesses. And I signed this LOI January 31st, which is definitely record speed. I cheated a little bit. I jumped the gun. I was starting to have conversations, towards the end of last year. So that allowed me to kind of hit the ground running fairly quickly.
Right.
But in that, 26 or 24 days or whatever it was, I went fairly deep on probably 10 businesses.
Sure. Okay.
We didn't get to the LOI stage on a number, but you do get a nice little bump in the number of businesses to look at right away.
Yes.
And then it sort of takes
catching
some
up to
time
market.
to
Catch up to market.
Yeah.
And so all of that to say, you were putting it in reps. It wasn't like this came across from one broker or wherever it came from. You're like, okay, let's go. And then you had a 4-week from identifying or starting to go and then sign. So there was definitely work happening there. And just
there was work happening, and the business was represented by a high quality broker / investment banker.
Okay.
So information was highly accessible. They were highly responsive. So my ability to dive in and get up to speed was different than probably on most deals that you would come across at that stage. Full data room and stuff.
Right.
We were, they were well positioned for me to go quick.
So Taylor now
the
has
business
luck a fourth time in his career. So a little bit more luck.
Well, we'll
in.
see.
Yeah, it's not done
see how
yet.
it goes.
So
I think
don't count the eggs for chickens.
That's right. I mean, I always sort of say like, I would have when we chatted and I was about to sign up, like I still would have said 10% probability of closing the deal.
Totally.
We're 5 weeks out now. I'll still say 50%. Because I think lots of stuff can happen. There's a lot of stuff to negotiate still. So yeah, just high level overview of the business. It's a Western Canada based roofing company. They do only commercial work, what would be considered low slope roofing. So they're not doing residential, shingle type roofing, which is a very different beast. Gotcha. Sometimes great businesses, just completely different trade, different structure, subcontractors. Whereas this business is, all employees, pretty substantial sized projects and only working with, industrial or, a lot of government projects, stuff like that. The scale of the business, I'll say my target range is listed on my website stuff, but this business is sort of in the middle of that. So, call it 2+ million of EBITDA. So it's a substantial business, and it's been around a long time. It's been around for 30+ years in the market they've been operating in. They've been profitable every year for 30 years. Obviously, the level of that and scale of that has changed over time. Sure. But after the financial crisis, they were profitable. During COVID, they were profitable. During the supply shock, they were profitable. And so I think that all speaks to the quality of the business.
Yeah.
And then, other details that I think matter a lot. So there are two kind of primary owners of the business. They do work in the business today, but they alternate weeks in the office.
Okay.
And they don't have jobs. They do have, they ultimately make kind of the final decisions.
Right.
But, from what I can tell, and obviously, you can only do as well as you can make diligence, but yeah. They don't have specific jobs. So they're not estimating jobs. They're not getting up on roofs and doing the roofing. They're not overseeing the foreman. They're overseeing finance and kind of the general manager and stuff a little bit, but they don't have a specific job. And that's key for me 100%. Because transitioning their knowledge is hard enough. Mm-hmm. Transitioning 30 years of knowledge and transitioning 7 different jobs.
Daily tasks.
It's really hard. So, I think, that's sort of where I'm at. It's for me, I look back, this wasn't all out of like, I didn't think about this at the time, but, I had a really small part of this agriculture business, and that gave me the ability to buy, a more meaningful but still minority amount of the next business. Yeah. And now I've created the capital to, probably do 2 transactions like this of majority control. I just, I could probably go and given my track record and stuff, I could probably go raise money and do the search approach. Yeah. But I like the way that I've done it. I've created enough capital to own it, effectively all myself. And that's really important to me because, I want to own these things myself. I want to have the opportunity to own it forever if I like it.
Yeah. Longer term investing. And have the ability to change your mind as you go and not have others potentially dictating that if you don't have that 51% or 50.1%. And then also I think we won't get into it. We chat a little bit offline, but you also have had that flexibility on I believe the structure of the deal, i.e., how much debt do you want to bring in it? It's not like you could, if you wanted to, go like not as much as the US where you might be, 90% of value on debt, but you get the ability to move, which just gives you more flexibility on the business as well, which is nice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, so we're recording this in Canada. SBA loans are all the rage in the US and make these deals super economical. I think we're all very jealous of that one situation in the US that allows you to put, a lot of very favorable debt on the business. That's not the case here in Canada. So it does mean that, the economics of deals are a little bit different. I was really pleased. I know like this moves into a bit of a scale of transaction that not, all searchers would be looking at, but I was really pleased to see the quality of financing that I could get. So, again, I won't share specifics, but, we're talking, banks are willing to offer, 3 times, on kind of their senior facilities on this type of business for the cash flow financing, and also willing to add on, a line of credit with really,
Right.
reasonable covenants and stuff. So yeah, really, I mean, at least we have some good bank options, financing options in Canada that allow you to structure this kind of deal. And when you're getting three times EBITDA in financing, I mean, I don't want to specifically say the multiple, but you could guess what the multiple would be on a business that size in the roofing space, right? Like we're not talking a 7 times multiple here.
Yeah.
So, you are able to they want to see skin in the game. The banks want to see skin in the game, but it's sort of, you're putting, you could put 2/3, or 75% debt on the business.
Totally.
And use a vendor note.
Yeah. And you have a good scenario there. Yeah, totally. Yeah. There's a lot of questions buried within there, but yeah, essentially I'd agree. And you've seen more term sheets than I probably have recently, but it's definitely over 50%, generally speaking, of purchase price. That works what it works out to. So like call it maybe 60% ish that you get from senior lenders. Again, it has to be a good, healthy business. Put a bit of a vendor take back or vendor note in there. And then, what are you injecting into the business?
One word of warning, which I think probably most people who have written LOIs and stuff have figured this out. But when you put together a vendor note in an LOI, just make sure that you are right off the top saying that it's fully subordinated and fully postponed. Because coming back around and saying that after the fact will be an uncomfortable conversation.
Yes.
And banks will only look at that as equity, an equity injection into the business if it is fully subordinated and fully postponed. And I mean, even like, make sure it's a reasonable interest rate. If a seller's trying to jam you and saying, I want 12, 15% interest, the bank's going to get really uncomfortable about that, because they'll start to say, well, this looks a lot like debt. It looks a lot like mezzanine debt. Versus truly equity, or, at least they could pretend it's equity.
Perceived equity.
And so, you want a reasonable interest rate, and you can kind of leverage that in your negotiations to some extent.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it will obviously depends on the right fit with the seller as well. So there's a lot of caveats to how you put together your structure, for sure. And likely not that much different than the US, just like way more aggressive on the debt side down there with the tools that they have. So
that's right. Yeah. And you can kind of always get 10-year amortization in the US, whereas the banks are reluctant to do 10-year amortization in Canada. They all say, oh, that's a thing of the past. We don't do 10-year amortization anymore. I have 4 term sheets with 10-year amortization on them. So you can get it, right?
Yeah, you can get it.
It's got to be a quality business, and you can get it. And if you tell them you got it from one, the other ones will
sure. Yeah. So it's competitive, which is nice, right? I think we think banks in the US are more competitive. Probably agree with that. Just there's less banks up here, but it's good to know there's competition, which is good for business sellers, business buyers.
That's right.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Thanks for sharing that. And it's good. And again, just to restate it, all of this sits on the premise that is a healthy, good business. Not every business is going to get,
for sure,
even a term sheet, right? You may not get one, right? So there's a spread.
Yeah, I mean, those kinds of terms that we just talked about are really like durable cash flow businesses. And when I say durable, like, there are businesses that economically should have durable cash flow, but it's the historical demonstration of those durable, cash flows. I can show a bank 5 years of history of cash flow in these businesses and talk about the highs and lows and what drove them. It's a very believable story. It shows, true durability and the capacity to pay down debt is high.
Yes.
It's also high. We talked about that EBITDA multiple versus free cash flow conversion. It's a business with extremely low CapEx. And so, while let's say, call it a 4 to 5 times type multiple. On a free cash flow basis, it's actually fairly strong because, that kind of business would normally have some CapEx built into it, and there's effectively none in this business.
Yeah. Yeah. Great business. Awesome. Well, I look forward to catching up here when it gets close to or gets done. And then it's the next chapter of, okay, how'd the first quarter go with the business? But
I was talking to my dad just yesterday, and all of a sudden I'm able to come up for air a little bit on this because we've gotten through a lot of the financial diligence, and I did a QE and stuff, and I'm sitting here going, okay, I'm probably 5 weeks out from transaction now. Shit, day one is coming soon, right? Like the real work starts day one. This is this is hard work, but it's sort of risk free, right? This is risk free hard work.
Yeah.
You're spending a bit of money with advisors and stuff, but but I mean, when you write that check and you're in the seat, now it's really hard work and a bunch of debt hanging over you, and whatever other pressures you feel in life. Day one is coming.
Yeah. And it's not like on day 30 or day 45, you go, oh, wow, this wasn't for me. I
want a refund.
Yeah. Like, no. Not as easy as Amazon.
No
like exactly. It is yours. Make it happen.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Yep. Well, I know we're pretty much up for time, but I did have one last question I want to ask you because I like to have a little bit of fun. We've been having fun, I think. I've enjoyed it. And my one question, let's jump down to, I've used this one a few times. I think you'll probably have a good answer for it. So the question is, so let's assume that you're driving downtown Calgary, and there are big billboards on the way into everyone's office. So they're going to see this billboard every single day. If I'm going to pay for your billboard, hopefully they're cheap, what would you put on that billboard to share with small, medium business owners about your journey and what they should be, focusing on or thinking about, or a warning of advice? What would you put up there?
I love that you asked this question. God, I've got a bunch of things. I'm going to pick on, instead of the small business owner, particularly, if it's okay, I'm going to pick on searchers a little bit.
Sure.
With my billboard. And it's probably going to say something like, stop going for coffee. And so I've had a number of conversations. There are a couple different groups of people searching for businesses, and you kind of can tell right off the bat. There are, and it tends to be so there are the really serious people who you can tell are going to get after it and write an LOI and write the check and do the thing. And there are people who are exploring this space, but they think they're doing it. And it does come a little bit with sort of stage in career. I think people right out of school who are doing this, so as I dove back into this space, what's unique this time around is I've had a lot of conversations with people who are searching for businesses, yourself included, and a bunch of people that, we both know, and a bunch of, I'm having conversations with folks down in the US and stuff as well. I travel to Phoenix a fair bit. And, there's just, now that this space has a name, ETA or small business acquisition or whatever, or search funds, there are a lot of people doing it, and they stick the title on their shirt, and they go for a lot of coffees and they talk about it, and they want to talk about deal structure or sourcing or whatever else topic it is. And they tell me about all these great conversations they've had. And it's like, I think it's a defense mechanism to some extent. It's feeling like you're active. It's feeling like you're doing stuff without actually having to do the really hard, scary part. Like the hard part is signing the check and committing a bunch of your investors to something. Signing the LOI sometimes is hard. Some people not so hard for it because they kind of don't see it as super valuable, and they are happy to drop out of the process. But when you actually write that check, it's hard. And so I think like it's one of those things where it's like, stop pretending you're
doing
active
this.
by filling your calendar with stuff.
Yeah.
None of that, like the only things that matter is meeting with small business owners and seriously driving towards an acquisition. And I mean, being honest when you sign an LOI, really digging into due diligence, and ultimately it's painful and it's hard to make the leap of faith, but signing the check and buying the business. And I think like on my first deal, it was really, really hard to part with that little bit of capital I made the first time.
Yeah.
And I think this time it'll be really, really hard again. Maybe slightly less hard because I've done it once before, and I hope that gets easier over time. But I mean, I think we're all like smart people, and smart people are risk averse, in this space. You have to balance that with sometimes just a bit of a commitment to do it. And so, yeah, my billboard is stop going for coffee.
Stop going for coffee, bias towards execution.
Right. Yeah, not bias towards activity, but bias towards action.
Yeah.
Those are different.
Right? Yeah, totally. I love it. And it's I've seen this definitely similar to you in this new defined search area that has an actual branding. I've seen it in the startup world where I came from too. And it's exactly right. Like if you're, and maybe to add to it as well, I love the billboard. I'm paying for it. It's going to go up.
Great. Let's do it.
Excuse me. And it's one of those things is like, if you're only feeling good about this journey, you're not doing something right. Like,
oh God. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
totally.
Yeah. If you're not painful. Regularly feeling like, man, this is painful. This hurts. This sucks.
It's scary.
What am I doing with my life? This is wrong. Or even, what am I doing? I don't know how to do this. Like every stage should be, unless you've done this 100 times, but like every stage should be different. So the more people are feeling that, I think is a good indication that they're doing what your billboard says. Plus coffee. That's a good way to leave it. All right. Well, thanks again, Taylor. And
thanks, John.
We'll chat soon.
Okay. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.